episode 20.
Welcome to the Live Fit podcast with your host, Glenn Johnson. Today you will learn techniques for permanent weight loss and improved overall health.
Yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit podcast. I'm Glenn Johnson, and you're not. Today is episode 20, and I'm going to tell you all about belly fat, and most importantly, how to get rid of it. Before I do that, I'm going to give you the answer to last week's question of the week. The question was, the best way to get flat abs is to A, do ab exercises on a daily basis, B, stop eating carbs, C, skip breakfast, or D, lose overall body fat and hope your genes cooperate. Well, let's look at the first one. A, do ab exercises on a daily basis. Absolutely, certainly this is a good idea for a strong core. It's great for the back, it's great for all of your movements. Having a strong core is crucial, but it will not melt the fat that's on your abdominal region. You cannot spot reduce with exercise. B, stop eating carbs. Certainly most people eat too many carbs, but not eating them at all is also a problem. I will explain that in just a few minutes. Skipping breakfast. This is probably the worst idea. You need to have a good breakfast first thing when you wake up. It tells your body that food is prevalent, calories are coming in, it doesn't need to store fat, it speeds up the metabolism, and it's really how you set the tone for the entire day. D, lose overall body fat and hope your genes cooperate. Though this sounds a little bit sarcastic, it really is the best solution because you have to lose your fat in your body and your genes decide where it comes from. So with the tips I'm going to give you today, you're going to be able to target your belly a little bit more than you would otherwise. I'd like to thank everybody for leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. It really helps the health of the show. If you enjoy listening to this program and you want others to hear it, please go on to livefitonline.net/iTunes or /Stitcher. You may also find show notes for each of my shows on livefitonline.net. Live Fit Online will help you get fit for the summer and stay that way for the rest of your life. This is not a diet. It is an efficient system of eating and moving that will help you become healthy, fit, and free. livefitonline.net. Without further ado, let's get on with the show so you can learn how to bust your belly fat. Today, I'm going to explain why people get fat, and more specifically, why people store fat in the belly area. The basic answer to this problem is people get fat because they eat too much, right? This is what we've been taught for decades and decades and decades. It's a pretty obvious answer, and it's true to a point, but that's not the only problem. Well, why then do we get fat? Because of hormones. We're just now starting to hear about hormones and the effect that they have on fat storage and, more importantly, the release of that stored fat. Why are there so many more overweight people now than there was 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago? Well, food is more available, but there are other reasons, and these hormones play a huge role. I'm going to talk about why these hormones are causing us to store more fat now than they used to, and most importantly to you, I suspect, is how to change them around so you can get rid of that stored fat. Hormones and the types of food a person eats matters much more than the quantity of food. Let me repeat that. Hormones and the types of food you eat are more important for determining your body fat than the quantity of food you eat. Now, I've been saying it for years. Diets don't work. They do not work. Diets don't work. In fact, I have a poster on my wall in my office that says, "Dieters never win." The long-term success rate for diets is around 5%. 5% of people who start a diet have long-term success with it. 66% of those that diet not only gain back the weight they lost, but they add a few pounds to it. Why? Well, most diets are not structured to balance hormones. Eating less while exercising creates a hormone situation that actually encourages the belly to hang on to the fat And then when more calories are eaten, this imbalance of hormone causes the storage of fat in the middle region. This hormonal imbalance also causes increased hunger and cravings. Perfect, just what we want. All right, let's get down to it. In order to explain why hormonal imbalance is so important, I first want to give you some basics about fat and then hormones. There are two basic types of fat, visceral and subcutaneous. I'm sure you've heard these terms before, but as a refresher, I'm going to tell you that visceral fat is that really firm fat that's underneath your muscle. It's packed in around your organs. It's what makes the firm beer belly that a lot of guys have. The belly that sticks out, makes it look like they're pregnant, but it's hard. Hard as a piece of wood. You sometimes might even knock on it. Now, subcutaneous fat, that's that loose, soft, jiggly kind of fat that's right under the surface of the skin. It can be anywhere on your body. So visceral fat, this lies in and around the organs underneath the abdominal muscle. It packs in around the organs and it releases hormones that are very harmful to the organs themselves. Now, the good thing about visceral fat is it has a greater blood supply than subcutaneous fat. It's more responsive to cortisol, and it's less sensitive to insulin. So we have a good and a bad there, mostly two goods. Being less sensitive to insulin is a good thing. I'll explain all this later. The main thing you want to know about visceral fat is it doesn't store fat very easily, and it burns it off much more quickly. So when you do store visceral fat, it is also going to be the first one to go when you start getting rid of this body fat. Now, subcutaneous fat, on the other hand, is less responsive to fat-burning hormones. It has less blood supply. It is more sensitive to insulin and less sensitive to cortisol. So in other words, it's easier to store this fat and harder to burn it off. Well, let's talk about what it takes to burn fat. In order to burn fat, we need three things to happen: a release, a delivery, and then burning. So for the release of fat, fat needs to be released from the fat cell. This is called lipolysis. Lipo meaning fat, lysis meaning to separate. Delivery. Fat first needs to travel through the bloodstream and get to where it's going. If the blood supply is low to and from the fat cells or to the burning cells, we will not have this delivery complete. Now, burning. Finally, fat has to enter the destination cell in order to be burned. This is called lipid oxidation. Because visceral fat has more blood supply, it is burned off first. Hormones. Two hormones play a primary role in fat storage and the body's ability to burn it. Insulin and cortisol are the primary factors, but estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are indirect players as well. Now, it's important to know that hormones do not function alone. They do not work in a vacuum. Both insulin and cortisol are key players, but the levels of each of these hormones and some of the other hormones that are in the system at the same time play important roles. And it's complicated, much like people's personalities are. You act in a certain way around your business associates, differently in a social gathering, maybe a sporting event, some other type of situation around your family. Just like you act differently with certain social situations, hormones do too. So to simplify the matter of these two main players, insulin and cortisol, let me first talk about insulin. When insulin is present, fat is more likely to be stored when there's an excess of calories, and less likely to be burned off when there's a deficiency of calories. So it seems pretty obvious that since insulin is the storage hormone, it has to have. But what may not have been obvious is when you do not eat enough calories, insulin thwarts the burning of fat. That's why diets do not work. If we have insulin, but we don't have sufficient calories to store, there won't be any storage. Insulin's main job is to store fat. However, what most people don't know is that it's also there to blunt the hormones that cause fat to be burned. You may have heard the term insulin resistance before, usually regarding diabetics. People can be insulin resistant in different areas of the body, such as organs and fat cells. When fat is insulin resistant, the cells do not store fat very easily, yet they burn it quite readily. Yay, great thing. However, when organs are insulin resistant, they do not readily burn fats or sugars. This means they're hungry all the time. They want more food. They're crying out, "Feed me, Seymour." The result is the person is hungry all the time, and it takes a great deal of food for them to feel satisfied. When insulin is accompanied by cortisol, the situation for belly fat storage and resisting the burning of that fat is increased huge. Cortisol is both fat-releasing and fat-storing. It depends on the other hormones that it's around. The effect it has on belly fat depends on the quantity, duration, and presence of these other hormones. In the brain, cortisol impacts hormones that regulate appetite. This is why cortisol is associated with cravings for highly palatable foods. Starches, sugars, sometimes salty versions of those foods. This causes people to eat more of the wrong foods and eat it more often. Excess cortisol stimulates another hormone that causes smaller immature fat cells to grow up to be big fat cells. Now, I told you that there's other hormones that play a role. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are the main helping hormones for fat storage and fat burning. Estrogen and progesterone are effective at controlling the accumulation of belly fat. This explains the typical hourglass figure that women have and why that changes in the later years, usually in and around and after menopause. Testosterone for men helps them keep off belly fat. And also with age, testosterone levels are decreased and the mid and belly region generally increases. And now a quick break. If you're over 40, you know how hard it is to stay fit and healthy. Everything seems to be against you. Work, kids, time, energy. Believe me, I know. But it doesn't have to be a brain drain. If you're sick up and fed of hating the way you look and feel, if you're confused and overwhelmed about how to eat and what to do, and if you are really ready to make that change to become a fit and healthy person that your kids can look up to, then Live Fit is for you. In just 9 weeks, I can help you become the fit, healthy, and free person you deserve to be. Visit livefitonline.net. And we're back. So, the answer to what you've all been waiting for. Drum roll, please. The easiest way to think about how to not gain belly fat is to know how fat is stored. The best technique for gaining belly fat is to eat a combination of starch, sugar, and fat. The starch and the sugar trigger the storage hormone insulin, and the fat adds the calories to give it something to store. Where might you find these 3 ingredients? Cheesecake, cookies, chocolate cake, ice cream, any kind of cake, any kind of baked good that has any sort of sweetness at all. Pretty much every typical dessert out there, with the exception of a nice bowl of fruit. Starch and sugar raise your insulin levels. Fat is neutral, but it is also very high in calories. So when you eat fat with the starch and sugar, boom, your hormones are loving it. Rather, the fat cells are loving these hormones because now they get to be fed. This creates an effective way to store fat, and it also sets up a domino effect that results in subsequent meals being similar in nature, higher in fat, higher in sugar, higher in starch, and it sort of snowballs and makes you continue to want those types of foods. Now, if you add stress to this concoction of starch, sugar, and fat, you will have a perfect storm of belly fat storage. So in other words, the best eating strategy to keep belly fat from gathering and to help burn it off is to eat plenty of proteins and vegetables and avoid sugars and starches. Now, fats, like I said, are neutral, so if you're eating proteins and vegetables with fat, you're really not causing a perfect storm of storage for the fat that you're eating. Fat doesn't make you fat. Hormones do. Veggies are really high in fiber. They're satisfying with a lot less calories. This allows for minimal insulin elevation. Remember that the number one goal is keeping insulin down. Veggies are high in fiber, and they're much more satisfying with less calories. This allows for minimal insulin elevation. Remember that the number one goal, if you don't want fat to be stored, is to keep your insulin levels down. This is also what Dr. Sears talked about in his Diet the Zone on regulating hormones. I had him on episode 11, and he talked about how he discovered the Zone diet and what caused him to realize that hormones were really the cause of body fat storage. The Zone diet and also my Live Fit program shows you exactly how to mitigate carbohydrates so you can keep those storage hormones decreased. Also, a very, very close second is to keep your cortisol levels down. You can do this by properly managing your stress and getting enough sleep. Both visceral and subcutaneous fat will disappear with this approach. So, once again, the best way to get rid of belly fat is to keep your starch and sugar and insulin levels low. Always eat a combination of carbs, protein, and fat. This will keep your insulin levels from spiking. This will also keep your ability to store calories as fat down to a bare minimum, if at all. I'm going to give you some fat loss tips. Do not go carb free. There have been some super low carb diets out there, and that's really not the way to go, because when you don't get enough carbs in your system, you start creating stress. Once again, the Live Fit program address this issue and help you balance the amount of carbs that you should eat. Second of all, exercise. You have to exercise. I swear to you, you do. You can't just eat properly. You need exercise. Weight training is great. Build muscles, increases your metabolism. High intensity interval training. Awesome. Very time efficient, very effective at burning calories. Also, nice, slow, relaxing cardio, like taking a walk in nature, is fantastic. You could do this pretty much indefinitely. Ride a bike, whatever works for you. A slow jog, maybe. However, if you're doing high-intensity stuff, such as running at a medium to faster clip, you don't really want to exceed the 30 to 40-minute mark, depending on your fitness level. That's going to start causing stress. And once again, we want to keep our cortisol levels down. Now, alcohol. Alcohol is also a great way to store fat. So in other words, if you don't want to gather fat and you do want to burn it, stay away from the alcohol. We want to lower our cortisol. So decrease your stress, use stress-lowering techniques whenever you can. Getting enough sleep, taking a leisurely walk out in the wilderness, out in nature, is a really awesome way to rebuild, recover, regenerate, refresh. That is one of my favorite things to do. Just go out in the desert, the woods, the mountains. Just go out on a hike for an hour or so with a dog, without, by yourself, with friends, whatever you like. I really enjoy doing it by myself, having some me time, giving me some time to just talk to myself or not talk or think or not think. I come back feeling 1,000 pounds lighter. Now, fasting is a common technique for either starting a diet or a weight loss regimen, maybe just to clean your soul, clean your taste buds, clean your palate, clean your body. Now, fasting could either be beneficial or not, depending on you. To me, it works great. Now, here's a little test that you can do for yourself to see if it's going to be beneficial for you. After you fast for, let's say, 24 hours, my fasts generally include nothing but water or herbal tea. After I do that for 24 hours, I'll eat a little something very light, a breakfast. So maybe some eggs, maybe some fruit. And then a few hours later, I'll eat something else. Now, if on the other hand, you have a craving for high fat and high sugary foods, you're the kind of person who would not benefit from fasting. If on the other hand, you can eat a couple of eggs or a banana or an apple and feel just fine, and then an hour or so later, whatever it is, you eat a little something else, but you're not really feeling ravishingly, devastatingly hungry, then you're good. I tend to start my fast after dinner on one night, and then I'll eat dinner the next night. But once again, this dinner consists of breakfast-type foods, which is going to be really light, like some fruit, and then maybe half hour later I'll have a little bit something a little heavier. And then the reason I like fasting is the days after that, I just don't care for a lot of food. I have a desire to eat really light and super healthy foods, such as lots of vegetables. I definitely do not want to eat things like pizza or cake. It's really awesome, and that's why I fast. When I start feeling a desire for those bad foods, the junk foods, I'll take a fast, and then I'm good for the next several months. And also, the funny thing about fasting is it really frees up a lot of time. But it's not good on a day when you have to be physically active. Let me review everything I just talked about really quickly. 6 little points. Dieting causes you to gain belly fat. Stress causes you to gain belly fat. If you want to gain fat, eat dessert and stress out about it. Traditional desserts are perfect for causing increased fat storage because they are chock full of sugar, carbs, and fat. Belly fat results from a mix of high stress and high insulin. So, here we go. If you want to decrease your belly fat, and all storage fat for that matter, eat a balance of slow-release carbs, protein, and healthy fats. Okay, that is my episode on belly fat, how to get it and how to get rid of it. Really seems pretty simple, doesn't it? Well, in practice, it might not be so easy, but that really depends on your priorities. If your priority is to get rid of excess belly fat, then you will make eliminating those foods that are loaded with sugar, starch, and fat a priority in your life. Keep them off the table. Just change your mindset. All you have to do is say, those are not foods that I eat. Because my health, my appearance, my life really is dependent on how I eat. Because food really does make a difference. Your food will change your hormones. You can alter your hormones. And that's what Dr. Barry Sears said in my episode 11 of the Live Fit podcast, that he discovered the zone while looking at hormones. And he found that you can alter your hormones by the foods you eat, primarily carbohydrates, but in a mix with other things like hormones and like personalities. They are dependent on other things around them. So I got my research for this podcast from a variety of sources, Dr. Barry Sears, my own experience, and a really good article in the March 2014 edition of Idea Fitness Journal. The article was written by Jay Teta. Great magazine. This week, I want you to think about the question of the week. What is a sensory deprivation tank, and how can it improve your health? It's kind of a trick question because next week's episode is going to be all about sensory deprivation tanks. I got in one, and then I interviewed the owner of it, and we talk all about it. It's really quite fascinating. It's amazing how beneficial to your health these really can be. So tune in next week, and you'll get to find out. Please come to my website, livefitpodcast.com, and read these show notes, read articles, and pass it around to all your friends. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to the Live Fit podcast.